Hello, Hockey World. Today is Wednesday, May 28th. I'm Julie Robenheimer.
I'm Michael Agello.
And I am Eklund, and you're watching the HockeybuzzCast on HockeyBuzz.com or YouTube or wherever it is you're watching it. And no, I'm not angry. I'm just still sunburned. I'm a little angry, but we'll talk about that later. I'm not really that angry because last night we had a fun. We finally had some scoring in the playoffs. It's been these low-scoring games are kind of crazy. This was it was a crazy game. Who expected this? It comes back to my theory though, and I'm gonna let you guys go first because I always do, but I'm gonna give you my theory on Henry Lundqvist and tell you exactly how to.
Well, just what's the theory?
All right, this is my theory on the Rangers. Now the Rangers, they are, and I was talking to our buddy Captain EO this morning, who agrees with me completely. The Rangers are the best team in a long time when they score first. Like they are a really hard team to come back on. You know, and we used to see this with the Devils and stuff like that in the playoffs, that they didn't have a whole lot, but if they score first, they're really hard. And they now not only that, but they have two things working for them. They have that general thing about scoring first, and the other thing they have is they have a goalie who gets better the longer he isn't scored on. And Lundqvist's style has always been this, that if you score on him early, you can get 3 or 4 goals on the guy in general. But if you don't score on him until the second or third period, you're lucky to get 1. And this is what we saw last night. Henry Lundqvist, it's not like he played bad. It was just these shots weren't bad goals necessarily. Some of them were questionable. A couple of them may have been dipping or diving or whatever. But he was beatable. And then he's a totally different goalie. He rides these momentum peaks and valleys very, very often. And that's what I saw, Mike. How about you?
Well, I think that it got off to a really bad start, and Julie was prophetic yesterday when she said it would be important for the Rangers to step on the Habs' neck and kill them, and they did exactly the opposite. Chris Kreider took a really dumb penalty. I
don't think. Okay, I will agree that the penalty was dumb, but it wasn't intentional. He was trying to stop and lost his footing, and it happened.
No, I think Eddie Olczyk made a pretty good point on the NBC broadcast where he said, he didn't want to hit him on the numbers because he probably would have gotten at least a 2-minute, maybe a 4-minute penalty, but he could have, gone off to the side.
But if you look at it, it's just like when he ran into the goalie that one time. He tried to stop, lost his footing, and fell. So yes. It was an inopportune time to take a penalty. Correct. Yeah. But was it stupid? I don't think so.
Well, okay. I don't think he was. I don't think it was intentional, but I think in the.
Okay, so if it's not intentional, then how can it be stupid?
Well, okay.
I'm just saying. Go ahead, finish your argument.
All right, the battle continues.
Yes, but they got off to a bad start. They came back. They tied the game. Then Montreal takes the lead back less than 2 minutes later, and until it was 4-1 when they pulled Lundqvist. Montreal was getting every break, was cashing in on almost every opportunity. Lundqvist was not at his best. I think he would admit that. They pull, and then they pull him and they bring in Talbot, and honestly, the game's momentum changed at that point with Nash getting that goal, and I thought the Habs were on the ropes there, and Rene Bourque saves them with a goal less than a minute after the Rangers had tied it at 4-4. If Bourque would not have scored that goal, I think the Rangers in the third period would have trounced the Canadiens because the momentum, the building was completely silent at 4-4, and they got reinvigorated with Bourque's goal. So I don't know about the Rangers having such a great advantage getting up 1 goal. They were down 4-1 and came back. Now the problem is
not the point that they can't come back. It's just the point that they are really hard to come back on, and that the way they play, the style they play is all about that. They definitely are a team capable of coming back from behind.
Yeah.
But Rene Bourque, Julie, a hat trick last night. Despite only playing 9 minutes in the game.
Yeah, I know. You were big on that last night.
Come on. Think about it. This is the thing. This is exactly what we talked about yesterday. This is what's happening. The Canadian
That's exactly right. I knew you were going to mention this.
I knew it.
You're so smart, Ek.
I am. Well, so are you. Gosh, you were prophetic. Mike's already called you prophetic. Yeah, it's just unbelievable. He not only got a hat trick, and then didn't play for another 8 minutes after he got his hat trick. I don't know. Go ahead, Jules.
It's one of those things, like I said yesterday, the Rangers needed to come out and put their stamp on this, and that early goal by the Canadiens was just not what the doctor ordered for the Rangers, and I was like, oh my gosh, like when they were up, I think it was like 3-1 or 4-0, I think it was.
4-1.
I was just like, I can't believe this is happening. Like, this is not how this game is going to end. And I was texting with somebody else, and I was like, well, I still think this is going to be an interesting game because for the first, 10 or 20 to 25 minutes, it was all the Canadiens all the time. And it blew me. I was like, there has to be a moment somewhere. There's like 30-plus minutes left in this game, and I said this in my texting. I was like, there's 30-plus minutes left in this game. It's going to turn around. There's going to be some change here, and that's exactly what happened in the next 10 minutes. And it's one of those things where you knew it was possible, you knew they could do it, but it was just a matter of actually getting it done. And more importantly, the Canadiens allowed the mistakes for that to happen. If you think about how those goals were scored, it wasn't necessarily because the Rangers were necessarily playing that much better. They were just able to capitalize on the opportunities that the Canadiens were giving them. So, and I will agree about the Bork goal that gave them the 5-4 advantage, because had that not happened and had they gone into the third period tied, I think the Rangers would have stepped on their throat and broken their necks, and we'd be talking about the Rangers in the Stanley Cup final now.
Yeah. And the thing is, I realize that Therrien has some rather goofy mechanizations when it comes to his lines, but last night I think he sort of proved his point. I think Danny Briere is a very excellent playoff performer, but he played less than 6 minutes last night and was -2.
Well, yeah, but there's more to that. Obviously you have to look at that carefully as to what those -2s were. The first goal was absolutely a bad play by Briere. Hops over his stick at the blue line. He's got to make that play. The second goal, he just hops onto the ice. And it's really just a matter of timing. Although that gave Therrien all he needed to not play him. I agree with you there.
The problem is you can't say that Thomas Vanek or Danny Briere or even Rene Bourque are not effective players. The problem is that they're all double-edged swords. They all have positives offensively, but the problem is that they have gaps in their game defensively. And in a series, in a Stanley Cup conference final, where one goal could make the difference between winning and losing, that's why coaches play conservatively and will put guys like that on the power play when the chance of the other team scoring is lesser. But that justifies his
three in the same brush. Those three are three very different players. Vanek is absolutely bad defensively, no question about it, and he is a minus. He's a minus in the playoffs. He's a minus. Briere's a plus in the playoffs, even despite being a -2 last night. Bourque is a plus in the playoffs. So Briere's not. You didn't sign him for his defense, but he's cost a couple goals in the entire playoffs. I can think of 3 actually that I could blame Danny for, but none of them turned into be the difference in a game where he's won games for you. The difference is you have to. Again, it's like we're not playing. It's not like they're not playing these guys because they have Crosby and Malkin up front. They're playing them because they'd rather play, Desharnais. There's certain things like who's got or Gianta. We're talking about differences. That to me, that's where I am with it. Hell, they won again and they're still alive. So it's like it's hard for me to sit there and totally criticize Therrien because he's the coach of a team that's now 6 games away from winning a Stanley Cup, right? So there's that. I just think that the way he's doing it is crazy. Now maybe it all pays off for him in the end. Maybe by game 6 or 7, Briere and Vanek and Bourque are are fresh and they can go out there and they can play like that's sort of what happened in the Boston series, So but that's a really risky thing to get to game 6 or 7. It's just the way it is. And last night when they were up 6-4 and 7-4, they're still throwing Subban out there every other shift. That to me was again, what the heck, Give this guy a breather. I mean, he is just. It's one thing for we talked about it a little bit yesterday, but it's one thing for a defenseman. Defense can play more minutes in general. Defensemen can play more minutes than forwards. We see it all the time, right? Their minutes are higher. There's at the most 3 lines, sometimes just 2 lines of defense in an entire game. But that's because defense are playing back a lot more, and they're not having to skate. Like Subban is a 200-foot player. Like he plays from his goal line to the other goal line, 33 minutes a game. That's a totally different. That's even more than you see from forwards playing that much time. So that's why Subban is so exhausted, Julie. That's at least my thoughts.
Well, this is where time management comes in, and we talked about it on one end, how you have some players who are only playing 6, 8, 9 minutes, and then you have other players who are playing 25, 26, 28 plus. Like if you're a football fan, you harp on your coaches in regards to clock management. Well, this is how you harp on your coach in regards to player management. And if you don't manage your players and the time that they have on ice, there are going to be times in which they are ineffective because you've played them too much.
And I agree completely. And I wish I could have screenshots of when they go to Vigneault on the bench versus when they go to Therrien on the bench, because there's so much in their body language of these two coaches that seems to reflect the way they are. Like Vigneault, he pulls Talbot. And an interesting point here, Julie, like we talked about before, if that game goes into the third period 4-4, do you put Lundqvist back in? I mean, it's an interesting. It was one of those things. It was like, wow. I mean, you've changed the momentum, and now you're tied going into the third period with a chance to go to the Stanley Cup Finals. Why would you not put Lundqvist back in? It's almost. But this is the thing about Lundqvist, and this is where I get some respect for Vigneault, who I've been critical about in the past with his goalie handling because he was terrible at it in Vancouver. But here he actually did the right thing. He kept. You're a team, and Talbot comes in, and you're a team, and you have to be a team. Talbot's a team. Talbot's a member of the team as much as Lundqvist is a member of this team in the locker room, and they keep Talbot in there because even though he doesn't look incredible, Lundqvist is having an off day, and this reminds me a little bit of Game 6 in the Philly Rangers series where Lundqvist was chased, and then came back in Game 7 and was dominant.
Right.
So they know that they can pull Lundqvist out, give him a break, let him watch the game for a little while, and then come back in and play. But would you have put him back in, Julie?
I would not have.
Okay. Mike, you wouldn't have either?
I probably would have thought about it, but I'm looking at it from a different perspective. At that point, you've taken him out of the game, and mentally, he's just not there.
Yeah.
Yes, he's the backup in case of an injury, and I'm sure he would have, been fine and blah, blah, blah. And I did like the way that he was pulled, which was part due to where the backup goalies are located in the Bell Center, that it couldn't just be like, all right, you're in, let's go. So, I think he handled it very well and managed his goaltender very well. But at that point, I'm not zoned in, everyone was like, oh, well, he could have had all intermission to get warmed up and psyched up and ready. I'm like, come on now, these are creatures of habit. Yep. And for a starting goaltender, they take like 2-3 hours before the game to get themselves mentally prepared and ready to go and, blah, blah, blah. So to say, hey, 15 minutes, go do your thing, I mean, that could have done more damage than actual good.
Yeah.
And plus, I think it would have shot the confidence of your backup.
Right, of Talbot.
So, okay, well, we don't have faith in you to actually win this game, so we're going to pull you and put the other guy back in, even though we already pulled him.
Right.
So I think, the thought might have crossed my mind if I was the coach of the New York Rangers.
Tempting.
But I don't think that I would have done it.
Yeah.
For those reasons.
Yeah, Mike?
First of all, I wouldn't have done it. Second of all, I was wondering whether the shoe on the other foot would have been whether Budaj would have been brought in for Tokarski after he gives up 3 goals and it's tied 4-4. I said on Twitter last night, will they pull Tokarski? Now the thing is, if you pulled him, I think he's done for the series because then it almost shows that you don't have any confidence.
It works both ways on that, right? Because Vino doesn't, and then Therrien doesn't pull his goalies all that often, but it works both ways in that situation because you can at one hand you can pull him there and say, listen, this is not your fault. Obviously the team's just collapsed. You could have they could have at least called a timeout. Even on the TV they were talking about these 3 goals and the Canadiens don't even call a timeout in there to try to stop the bleeding. But they didn't pull him and they kept him in there, and it turned out to work out fine for them.
Yeah, it was done as a momentum changer. It's always done as a momentum changer, and the momentum was changed with the Rangers scoring 3 goals. So if they would have gone 4-4 into the third period, why the hell would Vino want to change the momentum again by putting Lundqvist back in? So I think he made the right decision, even if it was 5-4. I think it's a 1-goal game going into the third when you were down 4-1 in the middle of the second period. Let me just touch on one thing you were mentioning about Subban's ice time. He played over 30 minutes. I mean, Alexei Emelin was out of the lineup last night. He's one of their top 4 defensemen. And if you would have balanced your ice time last night, it would have meant playing a rookie in Nathan Beaulieu, who played most of the year in the AHL, and Francois Bouillon more. And honestly, I would rather have a tired PK Subban playing, even though it's a 3-goal game. I mean, the Rangers had already proved they could come back in that game, and they were down 6-4 midway through the third period. 1 goal on that 2-man advantage, and they're right back in that game. So, I mean, hopefully they can get Emelin back, and that can decrease Subban's ice time a little bit next game.
Emelin's been struggling though too. I mean, and honestly, I honestly when I heard this news, I'm like, wow, at least Mike Weaver, who is like the best plus minus on the team by far, is getting back in there, which was good. I mean, he actually looked pretty good. He played pretty well. Now there was other crazy stuff going on. This game had everything. What about the embellishment call? We got to talk about that. Like Plekanec, not even with anyone near him, throws his head back. I mean, that was bad acting even for that. Mike, you're applauding, so obviously we'll start with you on this one.
I'm honestly, I realize that it's a tool in the game. It's getting to be like soccer, and of course the Canadiens seem to be the Real Madrid of the NHL because they've mastered it. I mean, Subban last night on that what some people were calling a slew foot. He embellished on that and drew a Ranger penalty on that ridiculousness.
Yeah, but that was all Pouliot because I mean that was ridiculous. I mean that at full speed and Subban is either a better actor or that looked a lot. I mean, Pouliot deserves it because he's a cried wolf guy at this point. That guy, I really want to go back through all these playoff games and figure out exactly how many offensive zone momentum-killing penalties that guy has taken in these playoffs. Benoit Pouliot, I mean, he could be a good player, but it's ridiculous. In every series, from game 1 of the Flyer series on, he's taken these offensive zone, and that was just a dumb play.
I'm not saying it wasn't a dumb play. I don't care if he's Alex Burrows. Subban over embellished. And Plekanec was his head snapped back like it was the grassy knoll.
That was ridiculous, and I was so glad to see that being called. And that there's no place for that, and that's just embarrassing the referees for. I mean, these guys have to realize, what those things up there, guys, are? They're cameras, okay? You're gonna be seen if you do something stupid like that. Even if you draw a penalty, it's embarrassing to you, the league. Everything about it, Julie. What are your thoughts?
Well, we call them hockey specials. Actually, a hockey special, to be true to it, Hockey East is one of the leagues in college hockey, but their refs are notorious for calling a tripping and an embellishment. And I'm like, okay, well, if he was tripped, then is it really embellishing? And if he embellished, did he really trip him? Right. So we call them hockey specials. This was not a hockey special, which was even more intriguing because rarely do you see just an embellishment call. Rarely. Usually an embellishment is, an exaggeration of the truth. which is why they're hockey specials. Yes, I tripped him. Yes, you played it up to get my attention.
Right.
So
right.
there you go. So was I excited that it was called? Sure, especially because it was so blatant. You know, I mean, there's so many times when you see, especially in the postseason, where guys are trying to draw penalties. And if you can just, you know, do one of these in spectacular fashion and get the call, then, you know, everybody's patting you on the back, except for all of us at home calling you names that I probably can't say on here. So this is where you come into it, and the refs were, I mean, they were talking about it on the broadcast last night, how, you know, they were showing the inconsistency of the penalties being called. And this was a penalty in game one, but here's the exact same situation, not a penalty here, you know, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Did they see it? Did they ignore it? Was it really not a penalty? You know, blah, blah, blah. So it's interesting, you know, just like anything else, if you're going to call a penalty, just call it consistent. And the problem with that is, for a series, you have different referees rotating in and out of these games. So it's hard to keep that consistency unless the officials are going through their own training. And I know that the officials watch the games that they've called, but, you know, I think it would also be beneficial to say, hey, look, this is a penalty that was called in game one, and show it to the refs who are doing game two.
Well, let me just say this. I think these specials are a cop-out by the officials. You make a decision. Either it's a trip,
well,
or
we
it's
agree.
an
That's
embellishment.
why we joke about it, calling it a hockey special. It's not like a term of endearment. It's sarcasm.
It can be both, okay? I've talked to referees about this because I had the same question. And it can be the guy actually did trip him. And it can be that while he was being tripped, this other guy made it look a lot worse to try to draw the penalty. It can be both. I mean, it's not like it's impossible. It's called too often, I agree, but it can be both.
It's a cop out. I mean, I'll grant you that there's a possibility that there's an embellishment of an existing trip or an existing hook or whatever. But more than often, it's one or the other. It's black or white. It's not always shades of gray. So come on, you know, make a decision and stick with it.
Did you guys see that? As an aside, we're going to go into some more of this stuff in a second. But Renee Bork's lawn this morning. Did you see this thing? That Renee Bork's parents, who I guess are in Montreal or in the suburbs of Montreal, woke up this morning to like about 150 hats on their lawn.
Because they like nobody threw their hat in Montreal.
I know, like we need more hats, right?
Like, honest to Pete, I can't even. The only thing that I can think of is that people didn't realize what was happening. That is the only thing that I can think of. Is that they're like, woohoo, we scored, you know, like we're in the lead, and then like just nobody connected the dots until it was too late. And then they're like, oh, well, was it really a hat trick? Was that his third? Like, you can envision these conversations happening in the stands, you know, like, oh,
yeah, God, no, exactly.
No.
You've seen this.
There was either that or there was 18,000 bald people at the Bell Center.
Or it's summer and no one's wearing hats.
Did Renee Bork play enough this game to actually have a hat trick? That can't be possible, right? I could think it too.
Ridiculous.
I know.
I couldn't believe there were so few hats.
But they did actually litter his parents' lawn, which is pretty funny. I thought that was pretty funny. Now we have a couple other fun moments from last night's game that we'll talk about. I did want to talk about Tokarski's save in the beginning of the game off the end of his stick. Oh. That was one of those moments that just like and from that point on you had a feeling that the ghosts of Montreal were at work. You know, there's something going on here in the Bell Center, because that you just looking at, you know, Hagelin's reaction to that shot. I mean, I've been as a goalie, you know, I've been in that spot where you stop a puck off that end of your stick, you know, and it literally is something you can't try to do. I mean, you go across and you can't actually. No one's accurate enough, I don't think, to make saves with that part of your stick on purpose. But my gosh, that was such a clear cut. This is gonna be a 1-1 game. So I want to talk about that briefly. But then let's also get into the Moore hit. Okay, John Moore's hit on Dale Weiss. We all think that's going to be. I think it's going to be the same suspension as the others. I mean, Mike, you?
I think it has a chance to be a little bit less. It could be a 1 game because it wasn't as late. It wasn't as late a hit as the Prost hit on Stepan. I think it was almost the same hit. He sort of tried to come around to the front and get him like in the middle of the chest, and I think he got him a little too high, and you saw the head snap back, and it also, and I don't think that anybody can dispute this. It'll also have to do with whether Weiss plays, or what the diagnosis is on him. If he has a concussion, then he might, then he'll definitely get suspended. But if he's skating in practice in New York and he's going to play in Game 6, he might get one or none. So I don't like the way the NHL does it, where they're penalizing the injury rather than penalizing the actual act. But I think it has something to do with it. And Stepan having a broken jaw, I'm sure, factored into Prost getting 2 games.
But Weiss might have a concussion, and that we don't know yet.
And if he has a concussion, then the Canadiens should have to tell the league, and then he probably shouldn't play in Game 6. If all of a sudden he's fresh as a daisy coming back for Game 6, then and they've already suspended more for 1 or 2 games.
You're being totally unfair here. 1 second. Fresh as a daisy. That was a hell of a hit he took there. It's not like he was embellishing this, Mike. That was like his helmet was almost in the 10th row of the stands.
I'm not disputing that. I'm just saying if he comes back in Game 6 and is playing the same type of crash and bang game that Dale Weiss has played during the entire playoffs, then I think that he's gone to the Lee Strasberg school of acting, like Subban and Plekanec.
Acting on that hit? I don't know, Julie.
Well, I'm going to side with Eck here, in that I don't think it was acting. Although, I will say, I agree in that I don't like the fact that the league is penalizing the result necessarily.
Yeah.
More so than the actual act.
I'm with you on that.
If it was an illegal hit, whether the player is injured or not, or depending on how severely the player is injured or not, if it was an illegal hit, it was an illegal hit.
Right.
And and that's where you go into like the whole Prost thing, and
right.
I know a lot of people were like, well, but he played, and I'm like, okay, but he broke his jaw and he had surgery, and but then that also goes into the theory of, all right, well, if I hit a player, and even if it wasn't illegal, but if I hit a player and he's out for a long period of time, like, let's say he's out like 4 months. Right. Should the player that hit him be out 4 months? And I'm like, well, then you go into eye for an eye territory here, right. And that's more of a religious debate than a sporting debate.
We're not talking the death penalty here. No, but Lars Eller hit Zuccarello along the boards right near the bench late in the third period, and something that could have been a really bad injury, and only because Zuccarello got his hands up did it prevent him from possibly having a neck injury. The league maybe should look at that, but because there was no corresponding injury, I don't think it's even going to get looked at or even fined. So I think the league has already determined it's the result and not the act itself, and I think that's wrong, but that's the way they're doing it.
Well, Dorsett and Bork also had their run at the end of the game, and and both of those are getting reviewed today by the NHL as well. So we're definitely at a weird time, I thought Dorsett's butt end to Weaver was pretty bad. Bork's was a retaliation protecting Weaver, which was, not as bad necessarily. But all this stuff kind of messes. It's just an ugly series. It's getting to be a very ugly series, and we're gonna wait till what happens if Montreal manages to win Game 6. That Game 7 in Montreal is going to be absolutely sickening as far as how. Yeah, and if either team survives that to play the Western Conference, they'll be lucky. That's going to be. This is just an absolute war.
And so Prost comes back in Game 6, and if Moore is suspended, then I don't know who the Rangers bring up as their sixth defenseman. So Game 6 will be very, should I say it, interesting.
Interesting.
Now, did you guys see this picture? Let me see if I can show you this picture. If you can get this picture right. Okay, hold on. Let's see.
Okay.
All right.
Is that Putin drinking out of the?
The World Championship.
Yes, that's Ovechkin feeding Vladimir Putin, who has nice jeans, I must say. Look at his jeans. He's wearing nice jeans there. Rocking
Euro style.
Yeah, he's rocking those jeans with that. Anyway, I don't know. I had a slight issue with this. I I mean, I get, but they don't want to get political here, but horrible
Yeah.
thing happened this weekend, as well with this whole issue going on with the Ukrainian ice rink being burned down and being terrorized. I mean, that's a horrible thing too. So I really have a problem with that. I'm not too keen on Ovechkin. I mean, I guess the whole thing, Ovechkin got what he wanted. He got back into a he got for losing in the Olympics. They end up getting returning back with some, I guess.
Yeah,
something.
it's a really flimsy consolation prize after they spent $50 billion for the Sochi Olympics that they won the World Championship in Belarus. But
Yeah,
And it's obviously it's watered down.
Yeah, it's a little bit. I would say yes. I would say definitely watered down. Okay, so let's get on to tonight before we because we haven't that was a lot to talk about. There's a lot going on tonight's game now. It's weird. It feels as if last night was in doubt. To me, tonight feels like the Kings are going to absolutely win tonight.
Sure.
Yes, but whenever I feel that way, and first of all, let me see how you feel. Julie, do you feel that too?
I don't think it's going to be a for certain. Okay. I think that the Kings have a very good chance of winning.
Right.
But I also feel that it's really difficult to eliminate the Blackhawks.
Yeah.
It's even more difficult to eliminate them on home ice.
Yeah. They've only lost one on home ice all playoffs.
Therefore, I think it's going to be a very interesting game.
I think the Blackhawks will win tonight. They're 7-1 at the United Center. Their backs are against the wall.
I almost feel like it's going to be an overtime. Like, that's how close I think it's going to be.
In an overtime, as we know, in an overtime, anybody can win. But
yes.
I think
without overtimes. But yes,
this is a team that and it's not the same team. But this is the team that did come back from 3-1 against Detroit last year. This is a team that came back 2-0 against St. Louis when everybody was starting to throw dirt on the grave. They need Corey Crawford to play up to the level of Jonathan Quick, and it's not out of the realm of possibility that the Jonathan Quick of the first 3 games of the San Jose series shows up again. He's had a history in these playoffs of playing phenomenal one game and then subpar the next. So I'll pick Chicago tonight to extend the series, but I believe the Blackhawks are 2-6 on the road. They won't get back to Chicago for Game 7.
Okay. Could be. I mean, I want to see what Chicago has left. I want to see what kind of heart they have. The one thing that they have unbelievable talent, and sometimes that even works against. Like in the Minnesota series, it felt like at times they weren't even trying, and then when they wanted to try, they poured it on, and they were really good. That's what's kind of different about the Hawks. If I was to look at the 4 teams that are left in the playoffs right now. The one team that feels like a Stanley Cup champion is the Chicago Blackhawks. The other 3 teams don't quite. They're just teams that are driven with heart. And it's hard. The Kings have won a Stanley Cup, I know, but they're still not as dominant, as the Hawks just have all that talent. It doesn't always mean you win. So, there's that, right? But yeah, I have a feeling that it's going to end tonight. I don't know why. I just think the Kings are that confident of a team, and the Hawks just the last couple games have just not.
The Kings have the ability, and they know how to step on their throat and break their neck.
Right.
This is why you can never count out championship teams.
Right.
Because they know how to do that. They have that killer instinct, and the Kings, unlike the Rangers who haven't won in 20 years, and unlike the Canadiens who haven't won in 21 years. Both the Kings and the Blackhawks have the killer instinct, and they know what to do when they smell blood in the water. And the Kings are not going to let this opportunity slip them by.
I agree.
I agree. I mean, I agree to a point. I'm just saying it's like, just like last night where I think the Rangers wanted to finish the series. The motivation was there for Montreal. Our backs are against the wall. Our dander is up. We got the Bell Center crowd. We got the fire and on the ice. We got Jeanette Renault. We have all these things. The United Center has the national anthem, and the big Oregon and everything. You know, the tradition of in Chicago and Chelsea Dagger and all that stuff. So I think that will provide some motivation. And you have a team with a championship pedigree who I don't think has been the better of the two teams in this series. I think the Kings have been deeper, have been bigger, have been more impactful than the Hawks have. But I think with Taves and Kane, if they can get Sharp and Hossa to actually show up, I think they've been zeros in this series against the Kings. If they make an impact, I think this series will go back to Los Angeles 3-2.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna enjoy this one. This will be a fun one for sure. This game starts at 7 tonight, doesn't it? Is that different? I think it's
at 8 o'clock. All the games are at 8.
I thought this was 7 for some reason.
7 Central.
7 Central. Maybe that's it. Okay, so lastly but not least, the Arizona Cardinals have officially released Arizona Coyotes now, as they're going to be called, have officially released a patch for their sleeves. I mean, that's not big news, but I just thought since this camera actually works a little bit to do this, I thought I would do this again until I figure out how to do this otherwise. But there it is, AZ on their shoulders, and yeah, not bad. You know, it's Arizona. You know, so Arizona has its hockey team, for what it's worth. They're no longer going to be the Phoenix Coyotes. Even though I don't even think that's completely official yet that's going to be changed, but they're definitely going to have or they're not going to become the Arizona Coyotes maybe till next season, but they're going to have an AZ on their sleeves, for what it's worth. So those of you out in Phoenix, go buy your new jersey because your old one is pointless now. It's absolutely.
And buy season tickets.
Buy season tickets while you're at it, but just take your old jersey and throw it into the Grand Canyon because you don't need it. It's completely fine. Anyway, so that's all of the news. I can tell I really wowed Julie with this one because I have that Julie. Really. Julie has that expression on her face like she's been wowed.
Stunned.
So yeah. So my dog, went to the bathroom in here and just before this podcast, and I've been dealing with this odor that is worse than any hockey bag or anything I can imagine in my windowless office here. So the only way I can really get through it was this. So I'm gonna end the show with this mask because this mask really helps me a lot to not have to deal with the smell. So just so you know, this is my. This is my. Is this going to be Couturier mask?
Is this going to be the cover of our Twitter feed?
This is his Sean Couturier mask.
Yes, Sean Couturier. I need a little filling here. I need some work here, but for the most part, I'm doing okay. Remember, I skied in this mask in the Poconos for an entire day. An entire suit.
Why would you do that?
Well, I made a bet with Owen, my kid, that if he went down the mountain, I would ski an entire day in a Chewbacca costume, and I did.
It's impressive.
Yes.
So, without the buzz.
It's just hockey.
Talk to you soon. I can't see the cursor. Where is it to stop the podcast?